Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you so much for checking us out. As always, you know the drill. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. I do 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I got to tell you, one of the all-time greats I've got today, Rhiannon Giddens, back with a brand new record along with Francesco Turrissi called They're Calling Me Home. Hi.
Hi. Oh, that's a very nice intro. Thank you.
No, it's true. I always love what you do. We've loved what you do all the way back, to the Chocolate Drops early days, and you've always kept it interesting, and that's what you're doing once again with this new record. They're calling me home. A bit of I guess, a dual play title right there because as I read, this was inspired by, of course, what we've gone through in the past year with the global pandemic, which is not the sexiest theme for writing. But if you're going to find a way to tackle it, I guess traditional folk songs and the ilk would be a great way to do that.
Yeah.
Did it come about naturally? Did you say, "Oh, this makes sense"? How did it happen?
Yeah, it was very kind of organic, which is kind of the way I work. I'm not too much into like trying to force something or let's do this thing and now we have to find stuff that fits it. We were doing streams and pre-records and things, just kind of trying to keep things going as best we could and stay connected to audiences as best we could, and we were just dying trying to do the songs that we'd been doing on stage. I was just like, this is not working. And so we had been kind of playing through some of these old songs. Like, I was finding them very comforting. And so I was just like, let's just start putting these in the streams. And it was just so nice to think about some of these things in a way that's more connecting to sort of overall humanity. Like, it's not just about us, like it never is, but this is a particularly good time to remember that. And so that felt so good. I was just like, let's just go in the studio and make something. And I don't know if anybody will want it, or I don't know if the label will be interested, but let's just go make something with these songs. And I'm so glad that we did. We kind of found a little gutter between two lockdowns, that fit us going into the studio for a week. And yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, the way it turned out, it is powerful, and knowing so much about history, musical history as you do, like, am I wrong by saying that there were probably more songs about death pre-pop standards days than there were about love in the way there are now? Because it feels like that.
Well, there's just a lot of I mean, love and death are pretty much, I think, perennial, or centennial or whatever. I think they've been with us for a very, very long time. But, a lot of those old folk songs, they don't end well. They
Mm.
might start with love and they end in death, you know? And I think that there's something about kind of reveling in the darkness and sort of just embracing that aspect of life, because for a lot of people it was unavoidable. We tend to forget how privileged we are. And I say we as in, like, there's a certain certain like class of people in the world who are living on pretty much our futures elements. We're taking all the oil and everything so that we can have
Right.
running hot water and really thick fancy coffins for people that we never see. Like, we're just not, we're not really, we don't have to confront death in a way that a lot of other people in the world do, and that our ancestors did, for generations and generations. So I think it's really, it's a moment where I think everybody's kind of realizing, oh, we're not actually that special.
Right.
It's like we're like everybody else. And I think that's really important, actually, because then if we act like it a little bit more, maybe we can make some more positive changes, I think.
Yeah, there's some optimism I think that you have that I'm just hoping I have at some point too, because I know we need a kick in the face occasionally.
You gotta fake it till you make it sometimes, with the hope thing.
And I don't want to make light, of course, of what you're singing about here and what has happened over the past year, 4 years, thousands of years, whatever, because I do say some of this a little tongue in cheek as I have before, but there's, some very beautiful but serious moments happening in this. And when you look back at when I listen back to these songs that you've done, especially the traditional ones, let's see, I Shall Not Be Moved, Black as a Crow, Waterbound. I know those are three of the three of several of them. When you're singing them, I guess the obvious question is, what they said then, how do they speak to now? How exactly did they speak to this moment for you?
Well, it really is that. that kind of cyclical nature of human life, and that for me, it's comforting to think of people like ancestors or just people who've generations who've come before who've dealt with these exact things. I mean, I was reading about the town of Eyam in England back in the Black Death days, the plague that was happening, and they realized they'd been sent something from London that had the plague on it, and they alone had it in their region, like it hadn't reached this region of England, so they went on lockdown. They basically went into lockdown, like we are now,
Hmm.
everybody to their own house, have to deal with their own stuff. Like this one woman had to like bury 6 of her children and her husband herself because they were that serious about saving other people outside of their town. And I was just kind of thinking like, none of this is new. Not any of it, And it's just like, it's actually comforting to go, people, did know what to do in some instances. They did think selflessly. They did think of their fellow man. And I'm like, all right, so let's just kind of like dig into that a little bit. I don't know. These songs really connect me in a real emotional way to history,
Hmm.
in a way that I do find very comforting, because it just kind of, it makes me go, we can't, we have everything we need to figure this out. We don't always let it happen, but we know we can do it,
Yeah. No, it's amazing how useful history can be. And that sounds like such a dumb, obvious statement in sort of a way. I find myself in those conversations a lot when you're just talking about general topics on the news. Like, no, don't you remember that this happened in 92 or 77 or 43? We've done
Yeah.
it. We know how it
Yeah.
plays out.
I mean, even look at like the flu pandemic, or they call it the Spanish flu or whatever, but it was like a multi-year pandemic, and you see like, let's go outside, let's open the windows. I mean, it's just like, okay, here we go.
You mentioned a town that you were talking about there, and there's another one that plays in here. And in fact, it's an original I read that you wrote called Avalon, which, I mean, I was kind of, I knew what Avalon was, but I was looking all of that up and everything, and what the translation or sort of a place to be saved and to recover.
Yeah, Avalon's one of those interesting kind of things that in my head, I mean, I wrote this song actually years ago and kind of sat on it. It was back in the chocolate drop days and we didn't use it for various reasons. And I sat on it and kind of brought it back and revamped the verses a little bit. But my name is Welsh, and so I've always been aware of sort of Arthurian legend and British and Welsh mythology. And like there's this idea of Avalon being the place where the king is and he's going to come back. And I mean, so
Mhm.
there's this real idea of it can stand for you know, lots of different things. But I think the main idea is like, we will meet again, kind of,
Mhm.
it's not even heaven. It's more like, to a place where we are ourselves again. I don't know. And so that's kind of what it was in my mind. This idea of it's all transient, right? This moment that we're in, this physical body that we have, it's not going to preclude us from actually being together again when we've passed to which is why it's so funny, because the verses are so. I mean, I can't wait till the video comes out because it's like I'm so excited about it. But the verses on the surface are quite sad, because it's about the kind of transition that we sort of associate with death as an ending,
Mhm.
but it's actually really about another beginning, and that's the emotional undercurrent. I mean, none of this I thought about when I wrote it, but now that I'm like listening to it and thinking about it and talking about it, I'm like, yeah, that's why I like this song, because it does represent both of those sides, which I think that's the way it is, really.
Yeah. It is the moment, the brightest moment, I guess, of hope I find in the album. And by the way, and it's beautiful. I mean, the
Thank you.
arrangement is just beautiful that you're doing on here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I should bring up some of the music too, because again, your musical partner Francesco Turrissi is part of this Italian and you American, but you have this Irish thing going on, and the Irish and Italian, like that doesn't seem like obvious musical bedfellows. Like, what is the cross section there? What is where? How do they meet?
Well, I mean, Francesco and I have very similar approaches to music, even though none of what we do overlaps. Like none of the instruments that I play, that he plays, none of the geographical locations that we represent overlap at all,
Mhm.
which is actually great because our approach is the same, and so that means that whatever we're doing has a chance to come together. And so I think we did that with the last record, and it's on play a little bit more subtly here. It's just now we've kind of been playing together for 3 years, and there's a real organic kind of way that our musics go together. And of course, he's also homesick for Italy, and just as I am for America. And then we've both been in Ireland for quite a long time, and me coming and going, but he's been here for 15 years. And so, yeah, there was just a lot of natural combos. And then a new one for me was in Newell Tsumbu, who was one of our guest musicians. And he's also been in Ireland for a very long time, but he's from the Congo. And so there's all this ideas of, what is home? We're all in Ireland as our new home, but we still miss our old home, but it doesn't mean we want to leave our new home. And what does that mean? And, so the ideas of having all those aspects of our original homes, represented in in some of these songs, and, just complicating a little bit that idea. It's like home is not a simple notion at all, and I've definitely grappled with that more than I ever have in my life since I've been, not able to go back to my home, my original home, and have really had to make a home here. Whereas usually my home was on the road,
Right.
So it's been a really interesting thing.
Yeah, and I'm to be as knowledgeable as you are about excuse me, the world of music and where it comes from and tracing the roots of music. I mean, that must be so fun when you do find the connection. Like, from what we know here in America and where that come from in Ireland, and again, how that's sort of like, does it ever feel a bit like a game in that way to you?
Oh, it's delightful when that thing kind of pops up and you're like, oh my God, this is fascinating. Anything that complicates the narrative to me is like bullseye, because it just talks about people.
Mhm.
It's like what people have been doing is always reflected in the music. And so when we can really pinpoint that and go, oh, this is because these people moved from here to here, or there was this one guy who moved to this village, and then all of us, I mean, there's so many of those stories where like a whole genre of music will come because one person went somewhere and influenced a whole generation of players. So all of those kinds of things, yeah, they feel like I don't watch Netflix, like, or very rarely, this is what I'm thinking about, like 24/7. So yeah, that's when, then Francesco's the same way. We're all just like, he'll send me a little something like, look what I found in this book. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's good to have somebody else who's as nerds out as hard as I do about it.
We benefit from it every single time.
Well, I hope
I
so.
should quickly point out just a couple things real fast. One of the last projects you did, songs for our native daughters. Let's get that right. Was so good, and I just want to say I know that a couple of the other daughters have been doing music too. That we've been like, if this were the regular times, it feels like a perfect time for a joint tour, and everybody does the thing. I don't know. Do you guys talk about that?
Oh
Will there be a
man,
follow up? Is that part of it?
we've talked about a lot of things. We would love to do another record. It's just a matter of, figuring out, especially now, like it's very hard to plan. Everybody's got their solo records coming out this year, which is amazing, actually, that it's all happening in one year, which is fantastic, which means maybe we can plan for another record, but it's just really hard to know because everything keeps getting moved. And, can we hold on to these 2 weeks to make another record if, somebody's tour gets, it's just
Mhm.
the spirit is willing. Whether we can figure out the schedules within the next couple of years or not, that remains to be seen. But we are all enamored with each other and what we did, and we'd love to do it again, and that's never going to change. So it's hopefully just a matter of time.
Yeah, I hope so. And then there's the opera that's still yet to premiere, right?
Next year now.
Next year
Yes.
now?
Yes. So it's just the way it is. It's this is the deadline that it's never ending. It just keeps moving, which is,
Sure.
I don't know how much how much stuff you make in terms of like what kind of creative process you have, but deadlines are kind of really necessary
Sure.
for making stuff. As you would know for making your shows or whatever, it's like as soon as you have a deadline, you've got, okay, I got a wall to back up against. So this is great. As soon as that deadline moves, you're like, okay, so I got to do this thing now." It's just, it's such a creativity killer.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get it, and it's gonna be awesome. I can't wait.
I'm sure
I've
it
been saying
will.
for 2 years, but I can't wait.
I'm sure
I
it
still
will.
can't wait.
Rhiannon, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Congratulations on this new record. It is powerful and beautiful. I love what you do, and hopefully we'll see you back here on the homeland, the home grounds sooner than later.
Soon as I can. Soon as
All
I
right.
can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.